And welcome to the 7th SCGES webinar. My name is Carol Woodward, and I'm a researcher at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in the United States, and I am Vice Chair of the Standing Committee for Gender Equality in Science. SCGES is an independent committee formed in 2020 by 9 international scientific unions, most of which are full members of the International Science Council. These founding partners had worked together on the ISC-supported project, A Global Approach to the Gender Gap in Mathematical Computing and Natural Sciences, How to Measure It, How to Reduce It, which became known as the Gender Gap in Science Project. Today, SCGES has more than 20 partners, most of which are ISC International Union members. They represent millions of scientists brought together across disciplines to promote gender equality in science. The aim of SCGES is to ensure liaison amongst international scientific unions to foster gender equality and the implementation of recommendations of the Gender Gap in Science Project, especially in the scientific communities that the scientific unions represent. SCGES has also issued recommendations to safeguard gender equality in science in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. SCGES actively cooperates with policymakers and international organizations, first and foremost ISC, for the promotion of gender equality in science. Our webinars are usually organized by 1 or 2 of our partner unions, and today's webinar, however, is organized by the Standing Committee as a whole. It is our first webinar that is a joint effort by members on a topic on which several of our unions have significant interest and in which a few unions have made significant progress on a topic we all need to work on, which is developing codes of conduct for our unions. So let me share my screen. Okay, so before introducing our speakers today, let me say a few words about all of you, the audience, who have registered for the meeting. According to the count made on the weekend, the 75 persons who had registered to attend the present webinar live on 6 continents. And 1/3 of them is in Europe, but Asia, North and South America, Australia, and Africa are all represented. As we found at previous webinars, around 75% of the registered audience is composed of women, and about 15% are men, with about 10% preferring not to state their gender. And as regards disciplines, it is good to see that the audience is quite multidisciplinary, with mathematics, chemistry, and physics being the most represented. And last but not least, we had 85% gave an answer onto their career, state of career, and we are represented by undergraduate students, PhD students, postdocs, assistant professors, associate professors, full professors, researchers, administrators, retired, et cetera, all career stages. And this shows that gender equality is of interest and of importance to all career stages. So we thank you for your interest and appreciate you attending. Okay, so we're going to get started now. And the way this will work is we will have 3 speakers. And after the speakers, we will have a sort of a panel question and answer session about codes of conduct and the experiences of our unions, these unions in particular, in codes of conduct. So our first speaker is Lenka Loczka from the Czech Technical University in Prague. Lenka graduated with a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering at the Czech Technical University in Prague, and in 1989, she received her PhD in cybernetics from the same university. Currently, she is head of the Cognitive Science Systems and Neurosciences Department at the Czech Institute of Informatics, Robotics, and Cybernetics, an associate professor at the Department of Natural Sciences of the Faculty of Biomedical Engineering at the Czech Technical University. Her research focuses on the areas of knowledge-based systems, data and knowledge representation, application of artificial intelligence methods to medicine, digital signal processing, machine learning, feature extraction and feature selection, semantic interoperability, mobile technologies in healthcare, and electronic health records. She is chair of the working group for personal portable devices of the European Federation of Medical Informatics, member of the Council of the Czech Society for Biomedical Engineering and Medical Informatics, national representative in the International Society for Telemedicine and eHealth, national representative in the International Federation for Medical and Biomedical Engineering, member of the Engineering Academy of the Czech Republic, and representative to SCGES from the International Union for Physical and Engineering Sciences in Medicine. All right, and to you, Lenka.
Thank you very much, Carol, for the wonderful introduction. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I would like to share today my experience in ethics and code of conduct and basically development in this area. And I'm, as Carol already said, representing the international union that focuses on medical physics and biomedical engineering, where actually ethics is a part of the discipline just by nature, because these disciplines are close to medicine, where the ethical issues are also part of the profession, part of everyday work. However, when we look at ethics, it's a very broad and interesting scientific disciplines. There are many facets like studying the behavior of individuals, societies, let's say also the scope of validity of ethical laws in individual areas of the disciplines. And then we go to individual disciplines and find out that there are slight differences and also different approaches how to apply ethical principles in the disciplines. Some of them are quite well established, especially in those areas that are here for many decades, maybe from the 19th century, 20th century. However, recently, we have also newly appeared issues in areas like artificial intelligence, robotics. And when we combine these disciplines with applications in medicine, then we have to really develop some new lines, new processes, how to apply the ethical principles when we also, for example, use these new technologies, when we try to apply artificial intelligence algorithms in medicine. Quite new news in this area is that the European Union prepared a new act on ethics in AI, and it touches and disputes all these areas that are relevant. Since I am from engineering area and my background is in engineering, actually, I focused more on this area, found out that it has this long tradition from the 19th century. The first area where the code of conduct was established is civil engineering. Why? Because it was quite obvious constructing new buildings, bridges, and so on, that if the lines in ethics are not followed, that it might be also dangerous for public, and that was something that initiated the development of the principles that are valid and are true till now, just they are now more developed, and all the topics that are covered in these principles are just transformed to other engineering disciplines as they developed from the basic engineering in the 19th century through mechanical engineering, later on electrical engineering, and in the 20th century also to biomedical engineering, which is the most closest to my area, where really the combination with medicine brings new questions and new ways how to solve these problems that appear in everyday practice. You can see on the list the basic principles. I don't want to go into detail in each of them because they are really generally applicable to any scientific discipline, to any profession, and they touch more or less the professional behavior of the employees in that areas. However, when we go further, we add also the interaction between, let's say, customer and the deliverer who brings some product to the market. We have the relation in medicine between the doctor and the patient and so on. And these are some additional principles which we have to take into account in each discipline. Based on the basic principles developed in engineering, there were new, of course, societies, federations, associations on the international level that unite the national societies or the professional societies, and they also developed their own code of ethics. So in Europe, for example, it is this European Federation of National Engineering Associations, and in this code of ethics, we can find division of the commitments into 3 groups. So it's concerning the personal ethics of each person that is involved in the profession, then the professional ethics with the relation to the activities performed in the profession, and the social responsibility. That means how we should apply these principles in relation to the whole society. For example, again, the civil engineering is quite a nice example, how to construct buildings, not just earning profit when we construct and sell new building, but also to construct the building in such a way that it is safe for all people who have to come in or who are just passing by, because again, in the 19th century, there were reported cases when they tried, for example, to save some material and therefore money, that finally the construction collapsed, and there were sometimes, unfortunately, also dead people. So this is what we can understand under this social responsibility. Of course, we have other societies in electrical engineering and computer science. It is, for example, the IEEE. And of course, this international society has also its code of conduct and code of ethics. I mentioned already what are bringing the new technologies. And in the last decades, there were many examples of ethical dilemmas. One of the typical example is coming from the area of autonomous cars, car without a driver. And then we have the basic question on the responsibility. Once we are driving cars, so the driver is the responsible person who has to act in such a way that the other participants in the traffic are not endangered by the behavior of a driver. So obviously, all drivers are responsible for careful driving, avoiding accidents, and so on. The question is, who is responsible for an autonomous car if it is involved in an accident? Is it the constructor of the car? It is the programmer who developed the software? Who is responsible for an accident? So we can see that this area brings new questions that are not yet fully solved and not answered on the ethical side. And of course, with the accident, there are the questions by lawyers finally, because if there is an accident, who is guilty? Who is responsible for what happened? And that is still open, and definitely we have to solve also these questions. Ethics in artificial intelligence is another big area which needs also deep study and analysis. What if happens, so how to ensure the transparency of decision-making based on these algorithms, who will be responsible for designing these decisions, and how to make all these algorithms as explainable as possible. We know that the very popular domain of deep learning is actually part of artificial intelligence that does not respond very well to these requirements of transparency and explainability, because neural networks are just as a black box. And currently it's on the way, the research on algorithms that will be able to explain the decisions based on deep learning algorithms. So we will see how it will work. And again, until it is really solved, we have to be very careful how to use these algorithms to really keep these ethical principles and be very well in line with them. I already also mentioned that biomedicine is somehow easily reachable or understandable in the line with ethics due to the development of ethical principles in medicine as such. So again, we can start from the ethical principles that are already existing in medicine. However, we have to add something more once we want to work with medical data really outside the medicine a little bit, but offering then the decisions or solutions based on the analysis of medical data back to medical doctors. And of course, the application of artificial intelligence algorithms brings new questions also on the ethical side. There is a very nice, relatively short journal article from 2021, which defines 10 important points. It's in the title 10 Commandments of Ethical Medical AI, and it formulates the basic requirements on the software which is based on AI algorithms that really the most important point is that the user has to be informed that the software which the user uses is based on AI, and also the user has the right to know on which data this software was trained, tested, to know whether for his or her purpose the software is actually relevant and can be used, because it again depends on the purpose. So this this guideline is something which is useful to follow. Then in Europe, we have also regulations that are linked to data privacy. That's on one side a legal issue, but on the other side, it's also an ethical issue to use the data that are labeled as personal or sensitive data, that we treat this data according to the rules. In medicine, there is also a relatively new regulation that is called medical device regulation. And in frame of this regulation, software that is used for diagnostic or therapeutic purposes and the decision-making of medical doctors is based on this software. In that case, the software must be tested and finally certified as medical device. And this process is also well defined. And again, there are not only the legal rules how to do that, but also we have to be aware of the ethical consequences of using such software. Last but not least is the question how to bring ethics to our students, because again, in engineering, it is not very common that these more or less humanistically oriented subjects are so popular with the engineering students, and that it is they are brought to students. So before we started designing our courses, we tried to find out also the examples how the other universities do that, and there are not too many who have it really well elaborated. One of the good practice example is Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands. And they succeeded to bring the topics from ethics into engineering courses, which I find very great, because it's better sometimes to bring the cases and the examples to students than just to have a standalone course on ethics. Actually, in Delft, they did it first in this way. However, they learned that the students are not so interested in this kind of courses. So to merge it together with engineering and to find the connections between the engineering solutions and their ethical impact is the best way how to show to students how to do that. So it's more based on the discussions on examples and problem. It's more or less problem-based teaching. In our case, we have ethics as a mandatory course in biomedical engineering curricula. The reason is that in the Czech Republic, the biomedical engineering is considered finally as a healthcare profession, and it has some rules to be filled. And to satisfy these rules, so the ethics is included as it is in medical studies. And when we designed later on also the biomedical informatics study program, we knew that ethics should be included. However, based on our experience, how it worked in biomedical engineering, we decided to put ethics into other courses where it fits to the topics, and to show the interconnection of disciplines. So because in biomedical informatics, we have a course on artificial intelligence. So the ethical issues connected with the AI application are included in AI course. Ethics of handling medical data is included in data privacy and security course, for example. And so I could continue longer with these examples. Finally, what to say as a conclusion? Engineering ethics as such is really complex, and with developing technologies, and as technology is part of our everyday life, we see the opportunity and also importance of ethics as part of engineering, education, and as part of engineer everyday work. And of course, we can just foresee or predict that it will be more and more important as new areas appear. Now we are talking about nanorobots, for example, that could be used inside of our bodies for doing some repairs. And again, this is the area where we have to ask, okay, who will be responsible if this nanorobot fails and is somewhere inside the body? Who will be responsible for doing something with the problem, and so on. So still, there are many open questions, many new challenges on the side of people working in ethics as a discipline, people working in engineering and physics, for example. And we see that these people have to work together to help to solve these questions and to design guidelines how to behave in such situations, how to design the technological solutions in such a way that really the no harm principle is working, and all of us can live with it. Thank you very much for your attention. And one of the examples how also the ethics is going also to other domains is to the area of biometric technologies, and that as it appears as one of the new application areas of the use of biometric data, that again, this area opens new ethical questions. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you, Linka. That was very, very interesting. we plan to take most of the questions during our question and answer period. The one has come in that I'll go ahead and post to you at the present moment. And that is whether or not gender questions are part of your ethics classes in the teaching of ethics, if you know of some cases where that's been included or if there's been issues with that.
Well, actually, it is not explicitly shown in the curricula. However, the gender issues are always part of it because it's open everywhere, and we try to bring it in the examples. So when it is really relevant, so it's part of the discussions, and we also then compare solutions designed by male and female students, which is also very interesting.
I'm sure. Okay, we will turn to our next speaker. So thank you, Lenka. Our next speaker is Sven Lidden from Lund University. Sven received his PhD in chemistry from the Faculty of Engineering at Lund University. He completed a postdoctoral appointment at the Max Planck Institute for Solid State Science, and then went to Lund University and then to Stockholm University, where he was a professor until 2010. He then returned to Lund University, where he is the Dean of the Faculty of Science, professor in inorganic chemistry, and principal investigator for the Nano-Lund Center for Nanoscience. Lidden is a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences and a Nordblot Ekstrand Medal. And a member of the, okay, let me start over, I'm sorry. Lidden is a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences and a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. He was awarded the Nordblot Ekstrand Medal of the Swedish Chemical Society, the Göran Gustafsson Prize by the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, and the Fabian Gyllenbergs Prize of the Royal Swedish Physiological Society. He has been a member of the Nobel Prize Committee for Chemistry since 2003 and its chair in 2014 to 2016. He is the SCGES Deputy Representative from the International Union of Crystallography. So I will turn it over to you, Sven.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I'm here today in my capacity as the SGEC representative of the IUCR. But I might, before launching into my presentation about our code of conduct, I must say that it has been a great help for me also in my work as dean. These are very general questions that I find that it is very useful to have a written document to lean against. So I will start my presentation. There. So the International Union of Crystallography, the IUCR, has a code of conduct that now dates back about 5 years. And I have found it incredibly useful as a guide, a support, and as a means of sending a message to the rest of the world about where we stand in these matters. And for organizations that do not have such a document, I must say that I recommend it very strongly. It is really exactly what I said, guide, support, and message. So how did our code of conduct happen? Here, I think it's important to start out with the fact that while we can trace back the work, it's quite clear that this is something that was going to happen to us regardless of the actions of individuals. It happened when it did because there were people working hard to set a code of conduct, and I would particularly like to mention the work of Jenny Martin, who has been the prime mover of this. But I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that the need for a code of conduct has grown over the years, and we matured into the realization that we certainly needed our own code of conduct. It was developed within our own Gender Equity and Diversity Committee, but I have to confess that most of the wording of our code of conduct was adapted from several other sources. We did not see any real reason for reinventing the wheel, so that is that's a strong recommendation to those of you who are thinking about implementing a code of conduct. There are lots of good texts out there. People have thought through these issues very carefully, and there is a lot of help to be had in that way. In the background to our code of conduct, you will find this text, and I think that there are a number of important keywords that I would like to raise here, and I will get back to them all. So the International Union of Crystallography, international highlighted, represents crystallographers worldwide and is committed to achieving gender equity and diversity. That, of course, mirrors our crystallographic community in all its endeavors and activities. A key aspect of the IUCR mission is to ensure that our community fosters inclusion, highlighted, ensures mutual respect, highlighted, and embraces diversity. To help achieve its diversity goals, the IUCR has developed this code of conduct, which applies to all its endorsed or funded activities. And this is also quite important, that we not only endorse, but actually fund activities. And I will get back to what that means for a code of conduct. So first of all, international. It's important to think about the fact that being an international union, we bring together people from lots of different cultures and lots of different backgrounds. And respect is a cultural defined entity. We show respect in different ways in different parts of the world. We should also remember that science is a culture all of its own, and that one of the challenges of science is that we are supposed to be quite critical to our colleagues and to our students. And we need to train ourselves and our peers and our students in how to be critical and still respectful. We cannot stop having the critical conversation, but we must be able to maintain that in a respectful way. So an international union needs international unity in how we deal with our conduct against others. And so a code of conduct is a great help. It helps us to explain what we want the entire international union to accept in terms of conduct, what we should not expect, and how we are supposed to deal with this in a thoughtful manner. Equity and diversity were the next keywords that I highlighted, and these are extremely important in order to understand why a code of conduct is so crucial. Because diversity itself brings a challenge to equity. There is no problem with equity if we don't have diversity, because, well, if we are all culturally the same, there is no problem with differences. Small homogeneous groups have well-established social patterns, and the COC is of little interest. But we want to be an inclusive and an international organization, and so we need to have rules that we adhere to together. And of course, the gains in being truly international are tremendous. The diversity enriches the science. And here I think it's important to point out that our differences are what makes diversity so important for science. Having different points of view means that we look at the world from different perspectives, and that enriches and gives a richer vision to what we do in science. Inclusion and respect were also among the words. And of course, we want to attract new groups into our community. And in order to do so, we must make sure that new groups feel included and respected in the way they are, and that they learn about the values that we want to bring forward so that they also know what is expected of them. And the rules of the game must be well defined. And this is again where the COC has such a vital role. Since we have an extensive activity in terms of publishing, we have the financial capability of supporting conferences, meetings, and workshops. And this, of course, means that we have a right to request adherence to our code of conduct during our conferences, but it also means that we have a responsibility to do so. Should we fail to act on this, anything that is under our auspices might hurt us and our credibility if we do not have a well-established code of conduct that we can point to show organizers and participants what we expect of an IUCR-funded meeting. This also means that throughout our community, we raise the awareness of what values we want to make sure that the IUCR stands for. Policing is not what we want to be about. But at the same time, having a written code of conduct means that we have a responsibility for its adherence. And so, of course, for funded events, it is rather simple. We have clear rules by which our any meeting that is funded by us needs to adhere. There are no protocols for reporting breaches of the code of conduct to the executive committee of the IUCR. And what comes to us may be a small trickle. It may be the tip of an iceberg. We do not know. But we do get reports of what members have perceived as breaches of the code of conduct. Having a code of conduct then means that we can easily evaluate whether we see these actions as in line with or outside what we think is acceptable. And we have had a few such instances during my time as president of the IUCR, and now during my time as immediate past president. And what I have found very heartening is that I have then reached out to the people who have had different views as to what constitutes a good behavior in our groups. And I have been asked, when I have been in contact with these people, I have been asked if we are policing our members, and I say no, we are not. But I think it is my duty to inform our members of our code of conduct and to make them aware that these are this is the conduct that we expect from our members, and being in breach of that means that individuals take a large risk in not in being published by the executive committee or by the IUCR as a whole, but rather in exposing themselves to severe and correct criticism around the world. And this is something that can hurt a career very much. So no, we do not police our members, but we do inform them of what we consider to be good behavior. And what I have found is that this has had very good effect in the cases where we have had to take such action. Looking back at how we have implemented our code of conduct, I think that there are very few regrets. If we were to do this again, I think we would have done it pretty much the same way. We might have done it earlier. I think that would have been a good idea, but then we would have had to develop a lot of the things which we could borrow from elsewhere, from others who had thought these matters through very carefully. And now we were able to launch our code of conduct rather quickly and with a minimum of friction, since these were since the wordings had been tried by others already. We were also relieved of making the mistake of having a too weighty document. It's very easy when you start writing things like this that you become too entrenched in the details, and that is not good for a document like this. We need to keep it simple. As a final point on this, I would like to thank first those from which we borrowed large parts of the text for our code of conduct, specifically the American Crystallographic Association, the American Biophysical Society, the American Geophysical Association, and several others. As past president of the IUCR, I want to express my gratitude to Jenny Martin, who was truly instrumental in setting up our code of conduct and who was the first head of our Gender Equity and Diversity Committee. And I want to thank the organization which I represent, the IUCR as a whole, for embracing this work. It proved to be very, very easy to launch the code of conduct and to get full acceptance for it. And it makes me very happy to be part of that community and very proud. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for any questions. And I leave the word back to our chair.
All right, thank you, Sven. Let's see, okay, great. Okay, we will go on to our third speaker. And our third speaker is Jillian Butcher from the University of Leicester. Jillian received her PhD in physics from the University of Essex, then joined the University of Leicester, where she works in the Space Research Center of the Department of Physics and Astronomy. Her research interests are in X-ray optics testing, development of instrumentation for X-ray interferometer telescopes, X-ray spectrometer technologies for use on Mars, and detector science for use in space observations of Earth. Dr. Butcher has chaired the Women in Physics group of the Institute of Physics, chaired the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics Women in Physics Working Group, and is now the union's vice president with responsibility for gender. She is the SCGES representative for the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jillian.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you for that introduction. So if I now just share my screen, making sure I pick the right presentation. And hopefully you're now seeing my screen. Thank you. Yes, so the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics. I'm coming at it from a slightly different point of view. And I'm actually going to start, first of all, with just looking at what the structure of IUPAP is. So I think one of the important things when one's talking about a code of conduct is to actually consider just where your lines of authority and influence are. So some unions will have a similar structure in that we have a council, which I'm a member. Then our actual members are not individuals. So some unions will have individual members. We're one of the unions that doesn't. And our members tend to be territorial. And so that will be for instance, the National Physical Societies. Now in the UK, that is the Institute of Physics, but in other countries around the world, it's a more general Academy of Science, such as in Australia or the US. So we don't necessarily have direct links or working with physicists through that route, but where most of our work is done is in our commissions and affiliated commissions. So our commissions are mainly physics topic related, so there'll be low temperature physics or sort of semiconductor physics, and affiliated commissions are independent entities, but which have some overlap with physics. So there'll be the International Commission on Optics, but we also have the International Association of Physics Students. So that's where most of our work is concentrated, and people serve in these commissions, and they do have various activities. And likewise, working groups are a slightly different setup in that they're typically supposed to be for a shorter period and a specific period of time to look at a specific action within the physics field. So the main work that the commissions and the working groups do is in terms of awards and conferences. These are the two main areas that we have direct influence and authority. Now, just say that on the IUPAP Council, we have a Vice President for Gender, which is my role, and we also have a Vice President for Ethics. And likewise, the working groups, we have a working group on Women in Physics and a working group on Ethics. So I'll just go into a bit more detail about what these groups do. So the Women in Physics Working Group was created quite a number of years ago, and its mandate was to survey the situation of women physicists around the world. So you can see that from quite early on, we have the working group has had surveys of, first of all, just women physicists, which has expanded till most recently we were part of the global survey of scientists, part of the global gender gap. And we also, in terms of retrieving information, we've held an international conference on women in physics. That's held every 3 years. The first was in Paris. The next one is coming up in less than 2 weeks' time, which will be online and hosted by India. And this is where we get the opportunity to have women physicists from around the globe and men to discuss issues of relevance to women. And one of the key aspects is that from the conference, resolutions are passed, which are taken to the IUPAP General Assembly and where they're hopefully voted in. Now, it has to be said that a lot of the work in gender and sort of things like codes of conduct have come from these conferences, I say, attended by ordinary women physicists from around the world. And I can say that over the years that these conferences have taken place, I've seen a real sea shift from it being sort of the conference and the women having to suggest means to the IUPAP General Assembly as to ways of improving things. It's now a much more sort of equal dialogue, and you're as likely to get the recommendations on sort of gender equality coming from either the Executive Council themselves or the other commissions. So while the working group looks and works more with sort of, say, the physicists around the world, the Gender Champion was a role that was created in 2014. And this is more sort of internal and actually making sure that the IUPAP processes and policies are being adhered to. So one of the things that was that came out of some of the resolutions from the conference was that the IUPAP sponsored conferences have to return data on the participation of women. The conferences were encouraged to make sure that they have women participating, whether that's as attendees, but very specifically as invited speakers and on the organising committees. So that data does get returned. There's a form that's returned from the conferences, and I get to analyse that data so that I can see if any progress is being made. The conferences also have to have a statement of harassment and a code of conduct attached to all their conferences, and we'll see that very shortly. Another thing that came out of in particular one of the conferences on women in physics was what's been called the Waterloo Charter, which came from when we had our conference in Waterloo in Canada. And that's a declaration of principles on inclusivity in physics, with guidelines to advancing towards more inclusive practice. And again, we'll have a look in a bit more detail about that. The positions of ethics, both the Vice President and the working group, these are more recent creations, and they're still sort of finding their feet, and we're still working out, because there's clearly going to be some considerable overlap between the work that we do. So very specifically, if you go to the IUPAP website, you can see under the conference policies, we have the statement on harassment. And as you can see from bothered reading all the text, the conferences are required to publish the following statement on their website and in all publications related to the conference. So this is, as with Sven, we borrowed other people's text, and very probably, I'm not sure where we took it from, but most likely it would have been from the Americans or the Astronomical Union, who always seem to be sort of a step ahead of other people. So using other people's text, I think, is certainly a good idea. One of the other things that IUPAP is directly involved with and the commissions, is the awarding of prizes and awards. So as part of the nomination package, we also have this statement, which again you can find on the website under the awards and call for nominations, that the statements have to be signed by the nominators, saying that to the best of their knowledge, there are no concerns regarding the nominee concerning their meeting standards of professional ethics and scientific integrity. So going on to the Waterloo Charter for Gender Inclusion. Again, this is, you can see it's on the website, it comes under the strategic plan. So I think that's in the last few years, IUPAP has revised its strategic plan and its aims, and a lot of equality and diversity is now included and directly stated as being part of their aims. And you see that there's some guiding principles, and then there's a whole several pages worth of practical suggestions that we propose that to make it's a more gender equal sort of physics field. And the wording there that I've highlighted at the bottom, so that the IUPAP strongly advises the physical societies of its member countries to abide by the principles of this charter. So I think that this is in one of the instances where we can't really enforce or police what this is, but this is again a statement of, as Sven was saying, that of support and encouraging others to do so, and that's as much as we can do really in terms of sort of trying to influence what is happening with our member regions. And then I just put up, this is not expecting you to read this. This is just from our web pages. Under the strategic plan, there's a section on ethics and science integrity, which also mentions the Waterloo Charter for Gender Inclusion. So these are some of they're very specific things that we have done and to meet the requirements and where we actually carry out our activities. But one of the questions is, what more can be done and what is missing? So one of the specific things we can do is update our code to include online and hybrid conferences. There is a lot of work obviously came out during COVID, and where meetings came online as to etiquette and codes of conduct. So that needs to be updated and evolved. And then we realised that, and particularly was thinking about preparing for this presentation, that we don't actually have a code of conduct for IUPAP itself, i.e. its executive council or its commissions. It's implied within the statements and the strategic aims. But this is something that the new ethics working group is working on, and we hope to be working with them to come up with something which will be specific for the executive council and commissions. Now, it's interesting that Sven was talking about sort of policing and the responsibility of the codes of conduct. So actually, what we don't have is any feedback on the effectiveness of the conference harassment statement and having the advisors. I know that from all the forms that have been returned, all the conferences do name a specific person who is the advisor, but we don't have any feedback as to whether any issues were brought to them at all. Was that process effective? If so, and would someone feel comfortable raising an issue with that person? You don't just name anyone who perhaps doesn't have any understanding of the issues, but we don't know that at all. So that's something that we might actually want to consider. How do we make sure that it's more than just nice words that we can put on our website and ask people to do? What more can actually be done? I say one of the things which has got back to us was actually not related to an IUPAP sponsored conference, was a conference which occurred just before an IUPAP sponsored one, where someone was actually sort of barred from the conference in case of harassment. The IUPAP conference then decided that they would not allow that person to attend, and we got involved because the person who had been accused said that they hadn't received a fair trial and procedure in the previous conference. Now, this was something we'd never sort of envisaged or worked through. I'm not entirely sure we've really dealt with it and worked out how to deal with such issues of areas where we don't actually have any influence. So I think we're still evolving. I think the way that the codes of conduct are set up means that they are open to being to evolving. They're not just set in stone. They can be evolved. We can improve them, and there are perhaps ways that we can make sure that they're effective and not just nice words on a page. So we're keen to sort of hear other suggestions and hear what other people are doing, and also to share some good practice. So with that, I shall thank you for your attention, and so look forward to some discussion and hearing what other people think, and where are areas that we might sort of evolve. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Jillian. Appreciate it very much. We'll go into the question and answer phase now. And so I'd like for Sven and Linka to go ahead and turn on your cameras. Okay. All right, we did have a couple of questions for Sven that came in after Jillian had started her talk. So maybe we'll start with those. The first is that just to confirm that when you have an ethical breach, that at this point you're not policing, you're not you don't have a policy that pushes a certain consequence at this time.
If we are talking about consequences for conference organizers, we do have that. So conference organizers are requested, first of all, to guarantee that they adhere to the code of conduct, and that they have a responsibility towards ensuring that all participants in the conference feel safe, that the code of conduct is enforced at the conference. Because as a conference organizer, you do have the authority to do that. We must remember that our union is a union of member states, not a union of individuals, and so we have very little formal power in dealing with individuals. What we could do is of course to bar individuals from conferences or meetings if that turned out to be necessary. Thankfully, we have not been put in a position where that would have been necessary. What we have found is that the situations that I have come across have been possible to resolve in a non-confrontative manner. Having a discussion with individuals who, in my view, has been more misguided than anything else, and where a discussion has resulted in the individual accepting that perhaps the IUCR Code of Conduct actually is a document that is worthwhile adhering to, and that it is in the best interest of the individual to do so. I am well aware that this is not necessarily where this discussion will end. I am sure that there are people out there who needs to be dealt with in a more forceful manner, and we will need to develop ideas of how to do that. But we still have to remember that we do not really have policing authorities when it comes to the behavior of individuals. We can certainly, when it comes to authors in our journals, we do not accept bad behavior towards our editors, for example. That leads to a definite stop of accepting papers from authors that behave that way. If we should have a conference organizer misbehaving, we can certainly state that no, we are not going to even look at proposals from a person like that, at least for an extended period of time, and we're awaiting a statement that this person will have changed his or her views on how to behave. But in general, I'm quite convinced that the best way to deal with breaches of the Code of Conduct is through discussion. There is, I am sure, a small number of people who will not be amendable to discussions, but I think there is a much larger number of people who are reachable and who can be helped by a discussion to see the light, as it were. We do not have unlimited powers here. We try to make the most of what we've got.
Okay, thank you. This might be a question that could also be posed to Linka and Jillian. What sorts of consequences or to use Sven's word, policing powers do you have in your union, and have you are there classes of issues or things that you could discuss that exhibit challenges with your current approach to that?
Ben, I can start. We are, as a union, in similar situation as it is with the Union of Crystallography. That means that it's a union and maybe it's even more hierarchical because the union is a union of two international associations. It's the IOMP, it's International Organization of Medical Physics, and IFMB, International Federation of Medical and Biological Engineering. That means that these two organizations have their rules, and I'm a member of the IFMB, so I can say that we have a working group committee on bioethics, which can handle also these issues, but since I am involved in on this international level more than how many, 13, 14 years, I did not experience, even in a conference organization, any type of this misconduct, misbehavior that should be treated in quite a strict way. I think that the very important role is played always by the representatives on all levels, starting from the national societies up to the international society, the boards. And if the newcomers see the good behavior from the ethical point of view, they usually do not try to do anything bad. Concerning plagiarism or things like that. So there are now tools how to check it automatically so that such proposals of papers are immediately cancelled and the authors get the feedback. So and of course, they have this, I would say, black points. And of course, next time, probably contributions from them are treated more carefully than from the authors who behave in a standard way. And I can only confirm also, as Lydin said, that we don't have any power or legal procedures how to do any kind of punishment, whatever, because it's a volunteering organization. It is not the relation between an employee and employer, student, professor, or anything like that. So it's not so easy to find the other way than just to give such a person a feedback. Okay, you are, if you behave in this way repeatedly, so you are not welcome in our organization.
All right, thank you. Jolene, do you want to say anything on the IUPAP?
As I was sort of saying, we haven't really had any sort of feedback or really had to deal with it in terms of IUPAP. Perhaps it is the case that the conference organisers are actually doing the dealing with the issue. So we have very little, I say, feedback as to whether we actually need to take any further action or not. But I think one of the things thinking about from the global survey, from the gender gap, was the issue of harassment was one of the biggest differences in the clear indicators across all the subjects and across all regions. Harassment came up quite a lot, and I mean that was a much more probably a broader, and we'd cover sort of workplace harassment. But I think it is something that, particularly in conferences as well, that I do think we need to be doing more than just saying and putting it on a website and expecting the conference organisers to deal with it all. I'm not entirely sure how we do go about making sure that is in place, but I am keen that this is a serious issue and that it should be dealt with.
Right, thank you. Okay, let's see. We had a question that came in also for after Sven's talk, but I think this also is a question that could pertain to all. The question specifically was, how old is the IUCR Code of Conduct, which I think, Sven, you mentioned was about 5 years during your presentation. But the question is, have you seen some important changes in your activities and feedback of members? So have you had to evolve your codes of conduct or policies or ethics regulations and things over the course of them, and what sorts of challenges might have prompted those changes?
So we have not changed the document, the code of conduct, during this time. I think very much thanks to the fact that we were slow starters, so that we had the work of others to build on. So they made the mistakes for us. We are very grateful for that. We have, however, changed the way we use the code of conduct, and particularly when it comes to sponsorship of conferences. And this is, I think, a great advantage that we have, that we do have the financial muscle to sponsor conferences, and we have developed the requirements. There's a committee that works for the executive committee to grant conference support, and the requirements on conference organizers, what they need to do ahead of time when it comes to, well, posting the code of conduct, getting the statistics for speakers in place, showing that we are reflecting the community in a balanced way, having a plan for dealing with things like making a conference family friendly, making a conference friendly in all aspects of that word. And we are probably now at a stage where we cannot actually expect a conference organizers to adhere to everything that we want to see in place, but we can also see that I think it has meant that the conferences that we sponsor have become better meeting places for people. And of course, we are still in early days. There is a lot to do. I fully acknowledge the fact that we have yet to face our first serious clash. So far, when I have dealt with individuals, I have been able to convince them that it's in their own best interest to change their views. You can become a very lonely scientist if you have extreme views on how to behave, and so I think our role is to help people here, not to judge them, but in the end, we are going to come upon unrepentant people, and we will need to act. We cannot do everything, but there are things that we can do. But we are developing constantly the way that we implement the code of conduct into the meetings that we sponsor. I think we are probably ripe now for looking at, for making an evaluation of what we have gained from the code of conduct, to see if there are things that need rephrasing, need brushing off, brushing up. But on the whole, I would say, thanks to being slow starters, we have a document that still works quite well.
Great, thank you. Jillian, what about IUPAP? Have you had to evolve or change any of your code of conduct in related materials due to any challenges?
to be honest, I'm not sure when our code of conduct was actually put into place. I suspect it was. Actually, that's not right. It's the statements regarding the awards are certainly very recent. So we've certainly, as far as I'm aware, we've had no challenges to that. So I haven't had to evolve that. I'm not sure about the conference statement, but as I say, I think it is something that we do want to review regularly to make sure it is meeting purpose, even if it is challenged or not. I think it's something, and as I mentioned, I think that so just being specific, like things with the sort of online conferences or hybrid, there are some things that we could add. I think to be specific. So I think the answer to is that we haven't yet evolved it as far as I'm aware.
Right, thank you. Lenka?
There was a certain involvement in respect with the conference organizing, at least in IFMB, and I think the same was with IOMP and with the IUPAP World Congress, that I'm not sure whether there were changes in the real code of conduct, but in the contracts with the conference organizers and some recommendations which also developed during the last 2 decades about balancing also female and male scientists on all levels of organizational committee and program committee, and also encouraging young researchers of both gender to be part of the competitions and so on. And so now, for example, we can just show it by some recent numbers from the IUPAP World Congresses. For example, in 2018, I was chair of the World Congress representing the biomedical engineers. My colleague, also female, was representing the medical physicist, and the last year Congress in Singapore, there were males. And the next Congress, which will be in Australia, is again led by a female. So that, and of course, the composition of the program committee is rather balanced in the respect of ratio of numbers of biomedical engineers and medical physicists in representing both genders, because when we compare these 2 professions, so surprisingly, there are more medical physicists, females, than biomedical engineers. So then it has the reflection, of course, in representation in the committees, but we compensate this disadvantage on the side of biomedical engineers by a very active group in the working group on women in biomedical engineering, which also organizes special sessions, not only on women issues, but also on some special topics in the area and so on. And at least in last conferences, these sessions attracted quite a large audience. So that it means that then also the others who just come to listen see that women are active in the area, and it can support also this learning by examples, by positive examples. So that's the way how we try to do it, not to be too much formal.
Okay, all right, thank you. There was one question that came in specifically for Linka. Do the ethical rules on AI that you mentioned have considerations on students' homework?
I think that the question is directed to ChatGPT, if I'm not mistaken.
Or similar.
Well, yeah, basically the students when going to AI, of course, they got some homeworks which can have also some ethical aspects or questions. And they have to be able to cope with that, and also finally to report how they would solve the problem. If we go to probable use of ChatGPT, I encourage students to use it on defined topic and to do critical analysis of the result they get from GPT, so that they realize what might be the positive aspect of using such a tool and what they have to check. Because we know that it can be cheating, it can also give you some information which is fake. So they have to learn to use critical thinking. That's and if they say openly, okay, I used ChatGPT for this purpose, then I can accept it. And they have to justify and they have to explain what was good, what was bad. And this is with all the methods they can use. They have to really be critical and not to accept everything that appears. That's the main principle we try to learn them.
So I know that different professors will have a different strategy towards incorporation or not. I think the question is really whether or not there's any rules or regulations yet at the very formal level on AI use in the classroom AI use by students for their homework and ethics about that.
They are not yet formalized, but okay. It's based on our personal recommendation.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. Next question is for Dr. Butcher. Do the counselors at your conferences get any training? And if so, what? And the questioner notes that handling situations like this is not something most people are automatically good at.
That is a very good question, and one I don't actually know the answer to, which is, I think, one of the things that we really don't know. We put this statement out and we know that the conferences are naming people. Now, I know from some of the names, I recognise them from our sort of Women in Physics group in our Women in Physics conferences. So I at least know that they're sufficiently aware of issues, but as to how well they are trained, I think that is one area that we can actually perhaps try and, as a union, sort of encourage or at least point people in the direction as to make sure that they do get the training necessary. That yes, you don't want anyone just doing it, and even say with the best will in the world, I wouldn't be any good at it without training. So I think that's probably the area that one of the sort of low-hanging fruits that we can perhaps actually try and address and say, well, we recommend that you do train them, and these are perhaps some of the resources that you can use to do so. But yeah, so it's a good point.
It's a very, very difficult question for a lot of entities that are putting together codes of conduct, is how to ensure adequate training of anybody who receives a notification of a violation. Speaking of that, one of the suggestions that was made in our YouTube chat was that maybe replacing the contact of a to a single person for violations, that it goes to maybe a concerns mailbox or something. And I know in conversations in with other entities that I've had in the past, concerns with that, you have to be very careful how many people receive the, access to those mailboxes and confidentiality and such. And I was wondering if any of you have kind of tried something like that in your union or of any of the organizations that you've been associated with.
No, I have no experience with that, so I can't answer it.
Okay. I also have no experience of it, but I think it's an interesting suggestion. I think it would be interesting to build a greater understanding of what sort of violations of the code of conduct that occur, and if people could post that in an anonymous mailbox without, I guess it would have to be doubly anonymous, but just so that we are aware of the sort of issues that may be arising, which don't necessarily surface. That would help us build a better system.
Mm-hmm. Excellent points. Julian?
Just thinking back to one of the conferences that they reported in the report of some of the other work that they do, it sounds as if they had set up a group and they had a social media campaign, and I think they also had a space which they called it a safe space for people to go and discuss issues. Whether that's probably not quite the same thing, but that there might be. Yes, I think there are some conferences who are actually probably coming up with some good ideas. So I'm now sort of constantly scouring the conference forums that are returned to find out what people are actually doing and seeing what good practice we can borrow from them. But apart from that, there's I haven't tried that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Another question that I had in looking through your different society or union pages ahead of this, I noticed that there's very different strategies for how you inform your communities of your codes of conduct or ethics expectations. And I know that, Jillian, in your presentation, you showed several screenshots of your web pages and where one can find some of those things. So maybe for you, the question would be, how did you end up choosing that way of incorporating that information? And for Sven and Lenka, how are you making these expectations and codes of conduct known to your communities? And for all of you, what are you doing in addition to your web pages? So lots of questions there, but basically, how are you informing your community is the big question, and what decisions went into that? Maybe start with Julian.
To be honest, I'm not quite sure how it came about that they end up in the website in that format, but all the rules for anyone wanting to submit a request to host an IUPAP sponsored conference is on a web page. So that is sort of the obvious place. There's the basic rules as to how to go about applying, but then there's also these specific policies that conference advisors have to adhere to, and the harassment statement is just one of them. And I say the conference organisers also have to they have to put that statement on their website to make sure that and any correspondence as well, so that it then gets disseminated and should be upfront. And certainly conferences that I've seen, it has tended to be on the front page. Sometimes it's been a separate tab on the conference web page that says code of conduct on it. So I think that is one of the ways that is getting out. And I think in terms of the other anything else beyond the specific, either the conferences or the awards. We're still in the process of actually sort of creating other sort of codes of conduct. So how we disseminate that, it's still really to be determined. Do we actually see what those things are?
Okay. Linka, do you want to comment about that?
Well, in IFMB, the main information channel is through the Council of Societies, which is organized in regions. That means each continent is a region. And through the regional chairs, the information goes to member national societies. That's really for informing the national societies about any event, either when there are meetings of the Council of Societies during some conferences, or then using the mailing list and going in this way. Concerning conference organizers, they get the guidelines, how to do everything, and also draft agreement, because all conferences that are also sponsored or developed in cooperation with IFMB have the IFMB logo. So also in the draft contract, there are the basic principles mentioned that touch all these issues that can appear during the conference, or just during the conference organizing. That means before, during the conference, and also afterwards. So this is how all people who should get the information are informed about these issues. And of course, they can also contact chair of the bioethics committee.
Okay, great, thank you. Sven.
Well, since we deal directly with the national committees, and of course they are informed. The COC is featured prominently on our webpage, and whenever we are promoting or sponsoring a conference, that is one of the requirements, that the conference also has this prominently on their homepage. And that way we reach the national committees, we reach the regional committees. We have at present, there are 4 regional members of the International Union of Crystallography. There's South America, there's North America, there's Europe and Asia. We are very soon to have Africa as a regional member as well. So we, through the membership, we reach the community, but also through the individuals who organize conferences. So again, the conferences are a great tool, and they are of course also the main vehicle by which people in our community meet. So I think it's a fortunate coincidence that we have a large possibility to make our voice heard at conferences.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very excellent point.
Can I also sort of add, I mentioned the Waterloo Charter, which a lot of work went into, and there's quite a lot of sort of fanfare when it was accepted within the General Assembly, which was at the last General Assembly, I believe, in 2021. But I'm actually keen to, again, not just make it a document that just sits there. So I think that's one of the things that we do want to look at, is how can we get that out there? Again, how can we keep it fresh? How can we make sure that we get that information and make it new, or make people want to look at it again? So I think that's another area that we're, at least I'm certainly keen that we look at that.
All right, thank you. Let's see. I noted that a couple of you mentioned in your presentations that you borrowed wording from other organizations in starting your documentation. And that's a very, very natural thing to do. And my question for you is, did you credit those organizations or interact with them in some way about that? Go ahead, Sven.
Okay, so we credit them on our homepage. We state very clearly that this document was drafted with the help of existing documents from the following organization and others, because in some cases we have not used the actual wording, but we have looked at many documents just for comparison to see if there is anything to add. We have not, which might be a good idea to do, contacted them with our thanks. That I think is something that I should do ASAP. It's always appreciated when someone gets credit for something, but they are clearly credited on the homepage for the text that they have provided. And I need to check with, as I said during my presentation, it's Jenny who has done most of this work and who has been a very dedicated person for making this happen. I should check with her. She is a very conscientious person, and Jenny Martin, that is, I would be surprised if she has not contacted those responsible for the original texts. I did not, I have to confess.
Go ahead, Julie.
I confess that, I don't know how and who exactly wrote and what resources were used, but it's a good point. We should probably, I guess it's one of these things that just evolved, and it's probably the sort of child of lots of different, slightly different statements. But it is good practice. We should probably go back and see if we can find out just where it came from and do that acknowledgement.
I should confess, my interest in this question wasn't to make you all feel like you need to be doing this. It was more on the other side. For those of us who are in unions who are considering doing codes of conduct and such materials, can we borrow words from you? And you're all very fine materials.
I'll sue you immediately. I would certainly recommend doing precisely what we did, with the addition of actually thanking the contributors afterwards. But there is so much work already done.
Yes.
And there is so much experience put into that work that rather I would so much prefer to have a good document in place than to spend a lot of time sweating over paragraphs that have already been sweated over sufficiently.
Indeed. Okay. Are there any other questions that have come in on YouTube? Let's see. So I'm not seeing any further at this point. So I guess
No, there is just in chat that there are no additional questions.
Okay. All right. I want to thank our YouTube audience for being very engaged and participating in asking some excellent questions today. With no further questions, I believe we can be finished. And thank everybody, and thank you, our speakers, for your time and effort in preparing this material. And maybe I'll volunteer your materials. There's some very, very nice things on your web pages for your unions, and really have appreciated having that access to it. So thank you. And for those of you who are watching this, thank you for engaging.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you. I agree.